Tales of Xillia was released in 2011 in Japan and PlayStation 3, 2013 worldwide, developed by Namco Tales Studio. However, the remaster, which this video is based off of, came out in 2025 and was developed by Doki Doki Groove Works Inc. And I know that when this remaster originally came out, there were several issues for the game, but based on the version I played after patches, haven't really had any sort of major bugs or issues with the game in my 2 playthroughs. Some changes to the remaster include the fact that the game's original graphical filter has been removed for the remaster, something that I didn't even realize was actually their original PS3 version, and any DLC related to licenses has also been removed, but all the other DLC has been included in the remaster. Tales of Xillia was also the 15th anniversary title of the Tales of franchise and is also notorious for being rushed in production. Well, I'll explain about that later. The main premise is that on the world of Reize Maxia, humans and spirits have a codependency, where humans supply mana to spirits, and in return, spirits aid humans in being able to perform spirit arts. And although the spirits themselves can't be seen, their presence is still felt, not only in the channeling of spirit arts, but also because the very nature itself is affected by the spirits. So when an organization has been creating technology called Spyrixes that can perform spirit arts without supplying mana to spirits, killing them in the process, this is where the main issue stems from. This is where our 2 heroes come into play, with Milla raiding a facility in order to destroy the Spyrix technology the Lance of Kresnik held within, and Jude ends up seeing what Milla is doing because he tried to sneak into the facility himself in order to look for his professor, who has suddenly gone missing and tries to give him the award that the professor won. But due to the fact that Jude goes to the facility, he ends up being branded as a most wanted criminal set for execution because in it, he learns that research is being done that is absorbing all the mana from human beings, turning them essentially into nothing more than just goop in a jar. Meanwhile, Milla ends up losing access to the Great Four Spirits, Ifrit, Gnome, Sylph, and Undine, rendering her now a regular human. And since she's not accustomed to human life or knows anything about humanity, she still has her mission and the conviction to see it through, but now Jude is taking the task of assisting her in her mission. Since Jude is now a wanted criminal, it doesn't exactly have much purpose in what he's trying to do in life, and now follows Milla to help her complete her mission. In Xillia, the player has the ability to pick which of the 2 characters will be the central protagonist. Do you pick Milla, who's essentially God, or do you pick Jude, who's a medical student that has now been caught up in this? Although Milla does take blame and does give opportunities to just not follow her in what she's doing, and even tries to help him find places where he can reside and live without being in constant danger. The issue with this dynamic of dual main characters is that the game doesn't really take full advantage of it. There will be moments in either playthrough where you will see things that should be exclusive to the other main character, but isn't because it's deemed too important and the player has to see it. It's also the issue where there is a big split in the story that's about 2 hours in length. If you play as Milla, you learn more about Milla in this section. If you play as Jude, you'll learn more about everything else, because for some reason the balance in this section split isn't equal. If you pick Jude, you'll learn more about him, learn about the party, learn about the villain group, the villain groups, everything, the world going on, while Milla's section is just about her plight and what exactly is going on with her. And even then, in her segment, she's also turned into a mute character, so she doesn't have much response to what's going on because of it, making it seem more and more like Milla's section could be summarized in 2 sentences, while Jude's section, if you miss out on in a first playthrough, will have you scratching your head going, what the hell did I just miss? Alright, question, which playthrough is this?
How the hell did he dodge that?
If you guessed this was the Jude playthrough, you would be correct. Although strangely this scene has a different version for Milla.
Now's our chance.
And I don't know why, it makes me question which version of the scene then happened. So my brother argues the Milla version is probably the one that actually happened, while the Jude one was the one he imagined. You will constantly see fans go back and forth on who they think is the quote-unquote real main character of the game, even if they're both equal to being the main character. Because while Milla has the conviction and the drive to fulfill her mission, to the point where the party is inspired and follows her on her path because of her conviction, you have Jude, who starts out purposeless and not knowing what to do and following Milla just because, and also because Leia has a crush on her, but it's the fact that Jude develops way more than Milla does in the game, and his arc is more compelling than the story Milla has in Xillia. It's also the fact that if you play as Milla, you immediately start with the break-in into the research center, but if you start out as Jude, you get a brief segment with him as a medical student, showing him his normal life and normal routine before the chaotic nature of him meeting Milla. But Milla already starts out with the first thing you do is her meeting Jude, showing the imbalance where you don't really get a segment of what Milla's life is before she sets out on the mission. She's already there. There are other differences in the story, like there are certain conversations that you only see if you pay to respect the main character, but it's just one of those things where it's just not enough to really justify the idea of having, ideally, the player go through the same game twice, because there's just not enough differences in the routes, to the point where people will generally tell others to play the Jude route first, since you get way more out of it, and then put a Milla route if they want to learn more about Milla. To the point where even the trophy data on PlayStation shows more people completed the game as Jude than they did Milla. Another issue I have with the game's writing is also the main villain group of the game. Because if you don't do side quests, then most of them don't have much going on, because the main quest doesn't exactly give you a lot of them to really tell their story. However, their side quests are time sensitive, because Xillia, like other Tales of games, have some side quests that need to be done at a certain point. If you don't do it, it's gone for the entire game. And the remaster does have an hourglass symbol to let you know about time-sensitive missions. Problem is, it only shows you on the map and minimap, so unless you're constantly checking the map after every major story beat, you won't really know that there's one you're about to miss and you don't do it on the spot. And some of those quests not only give characterization to some of the villains, it also includes the backstory of the game's main villain told to you in a time-sensitive quest that can be easily missed. Hell, there's a time-sensitive quest that gives you information about the world of Reize and Maxia that with that information makes me go from seeing the main villain as just being an okay villain to an absolute idiot. I like how the villain is presented, being this person who also leads with conviction, believing that the strong need to lead the weak, but is also a person that's willing to sacrifice people if it's for the greater good. So an interesting aspect where he's kind of like Milla in that sense, where she will fight and kill humans if they get in the way of her mission of stopping Spyrix technology, just like how she also gathers the party around her because of her conviction. But Jude's nature of aspect of freedom and purpose, the villain thinks that freedom is optional, so as a person has a purpose, they will be able to live on. Without a purpose, someone will just completely crumble, adding to Jude's story, and it's a very cool way of handling it. The problems is just, whenever the guy is presented with a question he has no answer to, he just immediately resorts to fighting, because, I don't know, he just right at come up with the answer, he just goes, the time for talk is over, we must fight, like, okay. And there are certain side quests that reveal information about Reize and Maxia that completely undermines the villain's end goal, to the point where I'm baffled they put it in the game, because it just makes me look like an idiot because of it. And while I mentioned the time-sensitive quests are for the villain's backstories, there's also time-sensitive quests for the backstory or further on additions to the story for some of your party members that are once again easily missable as well. So you're just going by the base story of the game that's mandatory, you'll get enough about them, but if you want their full story, keep checking the map to know when there are time-sensitive side quests that will also have more importance because they'll be the ones that are voice acted as opposed to other side quests that don't. Alright, quick question. Which playthrough do you think is currently happening on screen right now?
Ambition. If he isn't stopped, countless lives in Nachtigal and Azure will be lost all for naught. I am the governor, and protecting the people who live here is something that I must do.
That's not easy.
If you guessed it was the Jude playthrough, you were incorrect. This is just a scene you were being shown as Milla because it's too important to the player, even though Milla is not in this scene whatsoever. Overall, comes to the story to the Xillia, I think it's fine to kinda good. It's the fact that the game being rushed mean the game rushes out towards the finale to the point where it doesn't really feel like it warrants the big epicness it wants, or the fact that just the villain's backstories being tied to a time-sensitive quest is just a baffling idea. Like I said, you don't need to know it, but for some of them, it's the only kind of characterization they really have aside from a basic one-note writing for them. The dual protagonist setup is interesting, but again doesn't exactly do enough with the idea, and what is there heavily favors Jude since you get to see character development of Jude, the party, and more stuff involving the villain group. Well, when it comes to Milla, you learn more about her and Spyrix, but not enough to the point where we can summarize her experience in about 2 sentences, which is a big disappointment. But it's like, who do you pick? The one that the party is inspired by? Or Jude, who is inspired by Milla, but is also doing things just for Milla to the point where he doesn't really know his own purpose, and from the outsider's position, looks like he's just tagging along with Milla because he thinks God is hot. Now for the main gameplay, with Tales of Xillia being an action RPG. But the main feature of this game is linking, where 2 characters can link up together, and there are certain stat abilities that they will share across each other, on top of the main feature being linked arts. If 2 arts will link together, then they will perform a new ability, depending on what notch of the meter on the left is currently filled out. And what is a cool idea, it also means the fact that you might be making your entire arts build depending on what skills link with the character, rather than actually using arts for combos you feel more comfortable using. And the most linked arts in the game belongs to the pairing of Jude and Milla, with the others getting not a lot less, but still less compared to that pairing. There's also a weird dynamic where the game incentivizes keeping both Jude and Milla in the party at the same time, but it's also a game that wants to swap out, since you can't swap out mid-battle, and characters who haven't fought in a while will keep whining to the player about putting them in the fight because they want to be part of the fight.
Come on, let me fight already! I'm gonna lose my edge here! Come on, let me fight already! I'm gonna lose my edge here! Come on, let me fight already! I'm gonna lose my edge here!
Which Xillia 1 does keep your party level together, every person who joins in will match the party's level as well, so even when there's separate sections and when party members are separated, or at least temporarily, you will still be on the same level regardless, so it is, once again, wanting you to keep switching out party members, try new combinations, link with new people. The downside of linking is the fact that any status element one person gets will also be passed on to the other person. Upside, so is any healing you do. But the main flaw with this system is that while it's a cool mechanic where the other person will assist you, they'll wake you up if you're stunned, they have certain abilities like Jude will restore HP when you get knocked down, Milla will bind up enemies, Alvin will break guards, stuff like that is really cool abilities. The downside is, this mechanic was not thought with spellcasters in mind, because of the fact that it makes them get closer to you, spellcasters are going to be less likely to use their magic because they have to be close by because they're linked. Which is a big issue that you probably don't want a spellcaster getting up close to the enemy and taking hits, or being a shield for you by trying to block hits for you, which is a big issue mechanic. It also means that people like Elize, whose main thing is to stand in the back throwing whether it be healing spells or offensive spells, will keep running towards you into the action, which you don't want her to do, so it gives a reason not to link with them, but there's more reasons to link than there are reasons not to link. Hey, quick question. Which playthrough is this footage from?
Alright! Fall! Alright!
If you guessed it is from the Milla playthrough, you would be correct, because despite the fact that Milla's not even playable in this section, you still have to do this because that's plot important segment, which once again highlights how underbaked the protagonist setup is when you have a portion where you get to play as the other character. This is on top of the fact that if you're playing a game of multiplayer, linking with the other player will remove control from them and turn them into an AI companion, because linking is not an actual co-op mechanic. It is basically designed to just have the other party member just match your moves and match your ability, or use their abilities, since certain enemy types will be pretty much more vulnerable to certain things. Big enemies will guard, get Alvin to break their guard. Some enemies throw magic, have the character Rowen who will make magic barriers for you, stuff like that. Which means enemies can be a bit annoying if you're not using the right party member to assist you. Like I said, you can tag in and out anytime during battle, so it's not too frustrating. It's not as if the game heavily punishes you for not using a party member. This means finding an enemy will be a bit more difficult. And speaking of difficulties, boss fights are their own beasts, where the fact that just like the player, they will have this little damage barrier that needs to be broken before they can be stunned, which is a fair trade-off to prevent you from just stun locking up from the get-go. The issue is, their barrier will reform even mid-combo, and so those bosses can just easily break out of your combo with the player not doing anything wrong. And the mechanic is that when the meter on the left is full, and is now fully filled, it temporarily gives you the ability to chain linked arts back to back to back. But on bosses, because of the barrier coming back, they can just casually break out of your linked arts, or the linked arts can do stuff like send them flying away, which means they're no longer in position for the next attack to keep going. So it's one of those aspects where it's a neat idea trying to give the boss a bit more to fight back with, but also means when it comes to combos, they can just decide no thanks. Some bosses and enemies can also use items to heal themselves. And on higher difficulties, where it takes longer to kill them, the boss can just endlessly keep using the item, because as long as they're still alive, they can do it, and they can do it at a moment's notice, which is the fact that you have barely less than a second in order to stop their animation, to the point where one boss fight I had that was put on higher difficulty went on for way longer because the boss kept healing. I later learned from fans that you're supposed to use the character Leia to steal the item from them so they can't use it. But nowhere in Leia's description does it say that she actually steals items the boss uses. She steals valuables from enemies, so why would I think that her stealing ability would suddenly make it to a boss that can pull out infinite healing items suddenly will no longer have the ability when she steals something else from them? You also have the shops that, rather than having better equipment later as the game goes on, instead you have to donate material or currency in order to actually upgrade them, which means it gives more control to the player, and occasionally it will swap out what material each shop will get bonus points for, meaning it wants to definitely get more materials for fighting monsters or find them out in the field, stuff like that, and gives a purpose in order to use them. However, since it's all in the player's control, this means the player could have worse equipment in the story scenario they're in would actually want them to have, which I don't think will ever be that much of an issue, but it is a possibility of that happening. And the biggest hit to this game is what they did to the cooking mechanic, where in other Tales of games, you would hold the material, the ingredients themselves, and cook before or after a battle. But here, instead you just upgrade the cooking vendor and then just buy it outright. You'll be able to hold one of each dish, but that's about it. So it's kind of downgraded in that sense, with the whole entire need to expand the shops. This also means having different shop vendors in towns is kind of redundant, even more emphasized since when you find vendors out in the field, they just let you select which shop you want to use, but since you're the one expanding them, there's no real reason to have multiple different vendors in each town, since technically they all serve the same purpose in that regard. So that is a bit weird when it comes to how items work, everything. But even if you have undeveloped items or whatever, you can still change your equipment mid-battle, and since some items, some equipment have elemental affinities, it means going to a fight and your weapon ends up being resisted by the boss, you can just swap out for a different one at your convenience mid-fight. When it comes to exploration, you have the field areas and dungeons. The field areas is where the game starts to get repetitive and feel really samey, because a lot of field areas are either the woods but a bit more lush, the woods but it's eternally night so it looks fancy, the woods but it's covered in snow, or the woods but now nature is more desolate. And these locales not only look too similar, they're also modeled too similar with the way they put the items, little caves to try and find the holes or to get into, get the items, to a point where these field areas just get too samey. The actual dungeons, however, do have way more variety. It's the fact that Xillia doesn't really have puzzles for the dungeons, so they're simple treks, but they're still interesting treks, especially this one forest that has different pathways, so it can be easy for you to go the wrong way, but also get new goodies. There's also one dungeon that both characters go to, but they go through it differently, where Milla's section has way more restrictions than Jude's, but because Jude is way more open, it means there's more things to bumble your way around in order to try and find the correct pathway forward. So that's an interesting section when it comes to how they make the two plots differ. But when it comes to their own unique sections in the game, with the big story split, both of them are just backtracking through previous areas, and it doesn't really do anything interesting with it, especially for Milla's section, where it's just her backtracking through the early areas of the game, like twice, and that's it. That's all she gets. So it's less than Jude, but Jude is still just backtracking that actual interesting new area for his big divergence. Due to the game being rushed, there were some gameplay aspects that did have to get cut. Like secret missions got cut from the game, which would have been extra objectives during boss fights. A place equivalent to Namco Bandai IO, just a bonus area that self-references Namco Bandai IPs, also got cut. But the big one was the fact that there are supposed to be 2 extra party members in the game who are still in the game. The characters are still part of the plot, they're just never playable, and were later made playable in Xillia 2. But once again, I really feel like the story really suffers for it, especially since the fact that, based on the story, the characters in question would have been temporary party members, and not anyone who would have stayed for the entire adventure. Xillia is also the first entry where most of the unlockable outfits in the game were originally relegated to DLC, the DLC now being included for free, but it's the fact that in the base game experience itself, there are only about 4 unlockable outfits total, 2 of which that you already use at least once in the story for Milla and Jude, and then 1 for Milla, 1 for Alvin that were unlockable, but that was about it, with instead all the rest of it being paid. In return, the accessory system got a bit expanded, where you can now equip 3 accessories, 1 of which you're able to fully customize its position, its size, whatever you want with it. This game also did have a bit of controversy because Bandai Namco vaguely stated that some aspects were being changed due to conditions, but all they alter is the fact that the accessory that originally had a mustache and pipe is now only a mustache. That's about it. There's actually a scene in this game that was originally altered in the English release on PS3 that now matches its unaltered Japanese version, so if anything, they actually did more to make it close to the Japanese release than it was before. Now for the game's text, which when it comes to text boxes, I like that they're big and have windows in order to make sure the player can read them, and with this remaster, they actually subtitle dialogue in fights as well. The downside is, they subtitled all the dialogue in the fights, which means you want to do a linked art, then the subtitles for the linked art being used will then remove the boss dialogue during boss fights that feels like a case of, oops, I didn't think about that whole entire aspect. But when it comes to how they're shown in combat, yeah, it can be awkward because of the fact that you try to read it mid-combat, but it is super useful. I like how they handled it. The only big problem with the text in the game is when it comes to subtitles in cutscenes, because those in particular have no background and can sometimes just flat out be impossible to read, and it's weird how everything else they put a background but not on these. Which again also includes side quests, where some of them are voice acted because they're major ones that tie into the main plot, but for the ones that don't tie into the main plot and have no voice acting, their text now becomes easier to read because now they have a window on them. It's like, why not just put the window all over? And I say this because, based on the settings, you can have the cutscenes pause at every text section rather than just auto-playing like one flowing narrative. So in reality, it's a series of text boxes you're still clicking to. It's a fact that by default it goes from automatically. So it's again, just put the window for the text behind it during the cutscenes at that point.
Hey Alvin, why is Teepo always talking about Bazongas? What does that even mean?
Oh, he finally asks. It seems you're ready to take the first steps towards becoming a man.
Why do you have to make everything so weird? Forget I even asked.
Bazongas are the burning fire at the heart of manhood.
Overall, come to Tales of Xillia, I still enjoy Tales of Xillia, just the fact that its combat, I mostly like when I'm playing as Jude because he's the speed character that uses his fists, and his gameplay is just super fun to play as, even without linking to other people, since he's very much a combo heavy character. Ironically, despite being a med student, he is the worst healer in the entire game. Not a bad healer, far from it, but other party members get way more healing abilities or buffing abilities than Jude actually gets. So it's one of those funny aspects. But it's the fact that other characters I really don't really mesh with, like Alvin, who has to charge up his weapon or to break enemy guards. It's a cool idea that his arts allow him to charge weapons up, but doesn't really care about it. Or Milla, who has the ability to take spells that she would normally have to cast as a spell, or turn it into a quick fire, up close, more melee attack, giving her way more to her arsenal of arts because of this gameplay gimmick. That is really cool. The linking system is fun for the most part, but spellcasters do suffer because of the fact that they won't stay back half the time because they have to rush up in order to assist the person that they're linked up to, which is just a big flaw of it. On top of the fact you also need certain arts in your loadout in order to do linked arts, and when the game set devices using big combos, which you can also switch between characters mid-linked art chain in order to keep it going on the person, which is, once again, as to how cool linking is the fact that spellcasters needed this more in mind, and you also can't alter the AI for the spellcasters to tell them to still stand back, even if they're still linked. Like, characters can still be told, hey, prioritize healing and stand back, but if you link with them, that prioritize healing aspect just goes out the window in their logic. I do like the writing of the party and their dynamics, especially with the skits, showing their synergy and dynamic relationships, is the fact that the actual plot itself starts to evolve the further the game goes in, and is also weaker with playing as Milla, since she misses out on character development for the party and the main villain as well. On top of the fact that when it comes to the main villain, is the fact that the villain group, without their side quests, are passable. With their side quests, they get more added to them and everything, so it makes them more interesting. Just the fact that there's just one side quest that really undermines what the big villain of the game is. And I'm saying the word villain. There are people who think the main villain of this game isn't actually a villain because they don't think their plan is evil. Their plan is 100% evil. I don't know what people are talking about. But it's just a side quest that it just frustrated me because it just casually undermines everything the villain is doing when he can already undermine himself. I was gonna say about Tales of Xillia Remastered. It's not a bad game, it's still a good game. It's the fact that the stuff it does, other entries do better. You want better combat? Play Grace's F. You want a better story? Play Vesperia, play Symphonia, play Bizarria, and it's all those kind of entries, you know? One of those things where it's not doing anything necessarily hugely wrong, it's just not doing it as best as it could have. It's got some Tales of Xillia Remastered? Alright then, good day.
Jude, buddy, super pal, slap me some face!
What in the world?